Welcome back, deep divers. Today, we're gonna dive deep into the story of Asian Paints.
Ooh, Asian paints.
You know, the company that started in a little rented space in Bombay in the 40s
Right.
and somehow became a global paint giant.
Yeah, it's really interesting how their story kind of mirrors India's own economic development.
Yeah.
They had to deal with like wartime shortages, the license rod,
Oh yeah, the license Raj. I mean, that was
these
a
hurdles.
whole other world. Okay, so to really understand their journey, we need to go back to 1942.
Okay.
World War II is raging, India's fighting for independence, and imports are practically impossible to get.
Not the easiest time to start a business.
You would think, right? But that's exactly when four entrepreneurs, Champaklal Chokshi, Jimanlal Chokshi, Suryakant Dani, and Arvind Vakil, decided to launch Asian Paints.
Yeah, what's fascinating is they weren't actually paint experts. They
Yeah.
came from these diverse trading backgrounds.
So what made them think, hey, paint's the thing?
Well, the Swadeshi movement was gaining momentum.
Ah, right. Encouraging Indian-made products.
Exactly. People were looking for alternatives to imported goods, and these guys, they saw a gap in the market.
Makes sense. So picture this. A rented space in Bombay. Limited resources.
Huge ambition.
Huge ambition, yeah. What were their first steps like?
They started small, focusing on basic distempers,
Yeah.
getting a hold of like pigments and binders, all that was a challenge in itself.
Now, when you say distempers, what exactly do you mean? How's that different from like regular paint?
So distemper, it's a simpler paint, really.
Yeah.
Mostly pigment, chalk, and a binder. Water-based, so it was affordable and perfect for the Indian climate.
Gotcha. So basic but practical. But they were facing another challenge, right?
Yeah, back then.
Yeah, the skepticism. People weren't so sure about Indian-made products.
Oh, absolutely. They really had to work to overcome that. But they were smart about it.
Okay, how so?
First, the name Asian Paints. It conveyed quality, but it also highlighted their Indian roots.
Yeah.
Subtle, but powerful.
But is.
And they were obsessed with quality control. Yeah, had to build that trust. But what about reaching customers? How did they get their paint out there?
Distribution was key. Instead of going after the big guys in the cities, they went straight to smaller dealers,
Real.
even in smaller towns. It gave them this wider reach and built loyalty.
Smart move.
Most companies were focused on the urban centers. They saw the potential in a wider audience, even in rural areas.
So that was during World War II. But then India gains independence and things start changing rapidly.
Right. We enter the era of the license Raj. Regulations everywhere.
Oh man, the license rush,
Yeah.
controlling every aspect of business.
It was a bureaucratic nightmare, needing permission for practically everything.
So how did they manage to expand and grow during such a restrictive time?
Persistence. They didn't give up. They expanded strategically, setting up new plants in Calcutta, Baroda, and Madras.
So a gradual, calculated approach.
Exactly. Covering the entire country piece by piece.
And did their product line evolve as well? Or were they still just making distempers?
Oh, they had to innovate. One of their early hits was Tractor Distemper, launched in '65.
Tractor Distemper, interesting name.
Right. It was designed for India's tough weather, humidity, monsoons. The name Tractor, it conveyed strength, durability, resonated with a lot of people.
I can see why. Practical and catchy. But all this growth, these new plants, the new products, it all needed capital.
Right.
How did they manage financially during this period of heavy regulations?
They were financially conservative, very careful. They kept their debt low, reinvested profits, focused on organic growth.
A long-term vision, not just chasing quick profits.
Yeah. And even during this time, they made a crucial decision.
What was that?
They invested in research and development. They set up their first formal R&D facility in '62.
Wow. Committing to innovation even amidst all the
It
challenges.
shows their foresight.
Did any notable innovations come out of that era?
Definitely. One of the biggest was the color bank system, introduced in '68.
Color Bank. Okay, you got to explain that one. What was it and why was it so significant?
So before color banks, dealers had to stock tons of different shades, right?
Right.
Limited choice for the customer, high inventory costs for the dealers. The color bank used these tinting machines with a few base paints.
Okay.
Dealers could mix and match to create thousands of colors on demand based on what the customer wanted.
That's brilliant. Like the early version of those computerized paint mixing systems we have today.
Exactly. More choices, less stock for the dealers, streamlined production for Asian paints. A win-win-win.
A brilliant innovation.
Hmm.
What about branding and marketing during this era? Do they have any memorable campaigns?
Oh, yeah. Remember Gut 2?
Oh, yeah. the little boy with the paint can.
That's him.
Hey.
Created in '54 by the famous cartoonist R.K. Laxman.
I mean, that mascot was everywhere.
It was genius. Adorable, relatable, instantly recognizable.
Yeah, Asian paints really became a household name.
And it showed their understanding of the power of brand building way back then.
So by the early 70s, they had really built a strong foundation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A strong dealer network, innovative products, a distinct brand identity.
They were a force to be reckoned with.
But their journey was far from over.
Yeah, because then comes liberalization, a whole new ball game.
A whole new set of challenges and opportunities.
And that's what we'll pick up next time as we explore how Asian paints navigated this new landscape and went from national champion to a global player.
Exciting times.
When we left off, Asian paints was at the top of their game in India. They had a strong foundation, but the 80s brought a whole new wave of changes with liberalization starting to take shape under Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. How did this impact Asian paints?
Oh, it was a huge shift. The license barrage starts to loosen its grip, which meant new possibilities, but also a lot more competition.
Right, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? On one hand, you have access to new technologies and materials.
Right, but you also have new players entering the market, both from within India and global companies coming in.
Yeah, a lot more pressure. So how did they navigate this changing landscape, both internally in terms of their leadership and, well, just their overall approach?
Well, internally, there was a transition happening in leadership. Chimanlal Choksi, one of the founders, retired from active management in '82. He stayed on the board, but Suryak Dani took over as chairman.
Right, and from what we discussed before, the second generation was already getting involved in the business.
Exactly. Ashwin Dani, Suryatant's son, was already making his mark as technical director. And Abhay Vakil, son of Arvind Vakil, was also stepping up.
So it sounds like they were quite prepared for this changing of the guard.
It wasn't just handing over control, it was bringing in new skills and perspectives, ensuring the company was ready for the future.
Makes sense. What about their manufacturing and technology? How did they adapt those aspects to this new era?
They knew they needed to modernize. They opened a new plant near Delhi in '89, a state-of-the-art facility, followed by another one near Chennai in '94. And these weren't just bigger factories, they were incorporating new technologies, often from partnerships with international companies.
And this was possible because of liberalization.
Exactly. A great example of that is their partnership with Sigma Coatings from the Netherlands in '84. They got access to Sigma's advanced automated control systems for paint mixing and processing, something they couldn't have done easily before.
So they were really seizing those opportunities. Did this directly impact their product range?
Absolutely. Better technology, better materials, it all led to better products. In '86, they launched Apex Ultima, an exterior emulsion paint specifically for India's harsh weather conditions. And then in '90, they introduced Royale, a premium interior emulsion.
Oh, yeah, I remember Royale was like the go-to paint for a luxurious finish. So they were really starting to cater to specific needs and segments of the market, weren't they?
They were getting much more consumer-focused, understanding that different customers had different needs.
But how do they stay ahead of the curve in terms of innovation? It's a fast-moving market.
They always had a deep understanding of the Indian market and what customers wanted. They knew people wanted more choices and a simpler experience. That's why, in '92, they introduced computerized color matching systems.
92? That's pretty early for something like that. How did that change things?
It was a game changer. Before that, you were limited to a few premixed shades. With this system, customers could choose from thousands of shades.
Wow, that's amazing. It must have completely transformed the way people chose paint.
It did, and they didn't stop there. They were also among the first to bring the concept of color consultancy to India.
Color consultants?
Yeah, they hired trained designers who would give customers personalized advice on colors, help them create a look for their homes. It positioned Asian paints as experts in home decor, not just a paint company.
A smart move. So we're seeing all these innovations in technology, products, and even the customer experience. What about sustainability? Was that on their radar at this point?
Even with all these changes, they were already thinking about their environmental impact. In '95, they launched Enviro, their first low VOC paint. This was even before environmental regulations became stricter in India.
That's impressive. They were being proactive, but innovation and expansion need funding. How did they manage the financial side of things?
Listing on the Bombay Stock Exchange in '82 was a big move. It gave them access to more capital, and they used it wisely, making strategic acquisitions.
Like what?
For example, they acquired a competitor in South India, gained control of some of Burger Pant's India business, and even got a controlling stake in Burger International, giving them access to new markets in Asia and the Caribbean.
So a mix of organic growth and strategic acquisitions. And what about their dealer network? Did that continue to be important during this period?
Absolutely. Their dealers were crucial to their success. They invested in training programs and even experimented with computerized inventory management in the late 80s.
Wow, really ahead of their time. So they were using technology to improve their operations as well. And what about their marketing approach? Did that evolve too?
Oh, yeah. Their marketing moved from just focusing on the product to something more emotional, more aspirational. One of their most famous campaigns from this era was Har Ghar Kuch Kehta Hai, which means every home says something.
I remember that campaign. It wasn't just about paint, it was about expressing yourself through your home.
Exactly. And they were early adopters of digital marketing too. In '98, they launched one of the first major corporate websites in India, even offering online color visualization tools.
Wow, so they were really at the forefront of the digital revolution as well. It seems like by the end of the 90s, Asian Paints was a completely different company than the one that started in that little rented space in Bombay.
They had transformed into a modern, technologically advanced company with a national footprint and global ambitions. They were ready for whatever the 21st century threw at them.
Last time we saw Asian Paints transform into this modern, tech-savvy company,
Yeah.
really dominating the Indian market. But as we enter the 21st century, they had their sights set on something even bigger.
The year 2000, it's like a whole new chapter begins. They had this multi-pronged strategy: maintain their leadership in India, but also expand globally and diversify their offerings. They weren't content with just being a paint company anymore.
They wanted to be like the home decor kings. So let's start with that global expansion. How do they approach it? Do they just try to jump into those big established markets?
They were pretty strategic about it. Instead of going for the mature markets in developed countries, they focused on emerging economies. Places with high growth potential, kind of like India was back in their early days.
Yeah, I see the parallels. So where did they make their first big international move?
It was in 2002 when they acquired a controlling stake in SCI Chemicals in Egypt.
Okay, yeah, it gave them a strong foothold in the Middle East and North Africa, which was a booming market for construction.
So they weren't just exporting, they were setting up shop in these new markets. Was that a smooth process, or did they hit any roadblocks?
Well, going global is never easy. There were definitely some bumps along the way. They actually had to divest from some businesses that weren't doing so well, like in Malta and Australia.
Yeah, those things happen. But
Overall, their strategy worked. By 2020, they had manufacturing in 15 countries. International markets were a big part of their revenue.
it's amazing thinking about their journey, right? From struggling to get supplies in wartime Bombay to this global paint powerhouse.
It's remarkable.
But they didn't stop there, did they? They wanted to go beyond just paint, right? Becoming a complete home decor solution was the goal.
Exactly. They saw this huge opportunity. They were already advising customers on colors. It was a natural next step to help them with other parts of their homes as well.
So how did they make that transition from paint to this broader home decor thing? First, they expanded their Asian Paints Home Solutions service. This provided, end-to-end painting solutions from prepping the surfaces to color consultations and the actual painting.
So building on what they were already good at.
Exactly. But they didn't stop there. They started acquiring other companies to expand what they could offer.
I mean, it makes sense. If someone's repainting, they might be thinking about upgrading other things too.
Right. In 2008, they acquired Sleek International from Singapore, getting into kitchen and bath fittings. Then they added S bathroom products to really become a force in that area.
Kitchens, bathrooms, what else?
Well, they also acquired Lip-Owns, a wood finishes company in India, to get into furniture coatings. And then in 2014, they launched Nilaya, a premium wallpaper brand.
Wow, they were covering all the bases. So they were really becoming a one-stop shop for everything home decor.
But with all this expansion and diversification, were they keeping up with technology? I mean, the digital world was exploding in the 21st century. Oh, they were more than keeping up. They were leading the way in many areas. Remember those early color matching systems and online tools? Well, they took it even further. They launched a mobile app that used augmented reality to show customers how different colors would look on their walls.
An app that does that. That's wild.
It was cutting edge. And they didn't just focus on the customer-facing technology, they completely overhauled their back-end operations too. They implemented sophisticated supply chain systems, used RFID tracking for their paint cans. They even created this centralized sales management platform that connected almost all their dealers.
That's a lot of change.
Yeah.
So they were really embracing digital transformation, both for their customers and for themselves.
Uh-huh.
But did they stay committed to sustainability? Was that still a priority?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, it became even more central to who they were. They set some ambitious goals to reduce their water and energy consumption, increase the use of renewable energy, develop more eco-friendly products. A lot of their plants even achieved zero liquid discharge status.
Meaning no wastewater going back into the environment. That's impressive.
They were really walking the walk when it came to sustainability.
So all these changes happening, how did that impact their leadership structure? Did the family stay in charge?
There was a shift towards professional management. In 2009, KBS Anand, who had joined Asian Paints way back in '79, he became managing director and CEO. He was the first person outside the founding families to lead the company.
That's a big change for a family-run business. Did the family step away completely?
Not entirely. They still had significant ownership and were on the board, but they focused more on the big picture, the long-term strategy. And interestingly, the third generation of the families started to join the company.
Oh, so bringing in those fresh perspectives and keeping that legacy alive. But it couldn't have all been smooth sailing, right? I mean, there were some major global events during this period.
You're right. The 2008 financial crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, those were tough times for everyone. But they faced them head-on, with their usual cautious approach and their ability to adapt. They even launched new product lines during the pandemic, things like hand sanitizers and disinfectants. They used their expertise in chemical formulations to meet the needs of the moment.
That's so smart. Turning a crisis into an opportunity. That's what separates the good companies from the great ones.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, where does Asian Paint stand today?
Well, they're still India's biggest paint company with a huge chunk of the market. They're a global player with factories in 15 countries. They're this diverse home decor company with a wide range of products and services. And maybe most importantly, they have a reputation for quality, for innovation, and for being a responsible company.
It's really an inspiring story, isn't it? What stood out to you the most in this deep dive into Asian Paints? I think what's most impressive is how they've adapted and thrived through so many different eras. From those early struggles to today's success, they've always found a way to not just survive, but to really excel.
They had a vision, they weren't afraid of change, and they always focused on the customer. It's a great lesson for any business.
Absolutely. And I think their story reminds us that even when things are tough, with the right mindset and the right strategies, you can achieve amazing things.
Well said. And that wraps up our deep dive into Asian paints. Thanks for joining us today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those creative